Welcome to The Building Bite, a podcast for construction contractors, owners, and insurance professionals where you can hear from the experts about key topics to help you and your business be successful. I'm Chris Epps. I'm a senior director with Proactive, and I'm joined here today with my co-host Mike Diercksen, our senior consultant of innovation and content solutions. Our guest today is a rising star in the BIM world from Eagle Construction, Dr. Nathan Blinn. Nathan is VP of Construction and Strategic Innovation for Eagle Construction out of Virginia and is a true specialist in BIM. Nathan, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. As are we. Mike, how about you?
Doing great, Chris. Excited to have Nathan on the show.
Absolutely. Today, we're looking to dive into how Nathan and Eagle are utilizing BIM and driving company success, leading to all sorts of new opportunities for their firm. It's a fairly innovative process, so it's great to have you on the show today, Nathan. And before we dive into our main topic, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are now.
Fair enough. A good place, as good a place to start as any, I suppose. So essentially, my background is I started with an architecture degree from Roger Williams University in Rhode Island, found a passion for architecture, and then through that journey, found my passion for construction and eventually construction technologies. That passion led me to kind of get involved with some different competition teams, which led me to get involved with meeting different researchers from across the country. And I found my way to the University of Florida, where I worked on a master's in construction management and then a Ph.D. in design, construction, and planning. Where I focused on advanced construction technologies and technological integration. That became kind of a passion of mine, was seeing how we could, as an industry, more effectively leverage these technologies to try to improve the way we build and the way the whole industry interacts with other industries, such as the insurance industry and a number of others around the world.
Fantastic. And Nathan and I go way back as we met at Roger Williams University back in undergrad. But Nathan, I'm wondering if you can walk us through that decision, right? You had done the VDC tournaments through Roger Williams, and you identified University of Florida as a great place to continue your education. Can you kind of walk us through this decision? Why did you decide on UF? Why a doctorate in BIM? And what was it that you were looking to study with that?
That's a great question, and one I got a lot while I was completing the degree, and one I still get now, which is why and how, and didn't even know that existed. I found the passion for technology through my architecture studies. I really found a niche that I connected with. I saw the way that these technologies could transform the industry and help empower all of the different groups within AEC. And so through finding that niche in technology, I really started to develop a passion. And the reason I ended up at UF was one of the top researchers in the world for building information modeling technologies and advanced construction technologies, Dr. Raymond Issa. That's where he is, and that's where he's been. And I had the privilege of meeting him. My mentor at Roger Williams got me connected with him. We had a few conversations, and it became clear that's where I wanted to go to do my research and to continue expanding my knowledge. From there, I guess it's kind of history. I got there and haven't looked back since. Really dug in deep, working through pick a technology in construction, and I've worked on it or done some research with it. And that really just continued to build my passion for what I'm doing. And then that's where I continued to hone my area of interest, which eventually led to that integration piece, which was how do we leverage these technologies effectively? Because there's a lot out there and it's always changing.
Interesting. Yeah. And I know that, Nathan, I think you're still connected to UF. Something that we hear about all the time is about the talent gap. There's a shortage right now going on. Mm-hmm. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that decision-making, the value add in pursuing that advanced degree in BIM rather than necessarily going straight to market to a commercial space? You decided to go for that advanced degree. Where do you think our listeners who are maybe thinking about pursuing that, where do you think they could find the value in that decision?
Yeah, I mean, another great question, right, is, there's that wisdom of do you go out and start using some of these skills and gaining that experience, or is there a degree option? And I think for me, what it was about was, I love teaching, and I always felt like I could do more with these technologies, and education was a way that I felt like I could accomplish that. And so while I was at the University of Florida, I worked for different builders and did a number of things to apply this knowledge while I was doing practical research at the same time. And I think for somebody who's listening, who's thinking about how do you get into this technology, for me, there's really no wrong way to get into this industry. If you're the hands-on kind of person who wants to just dive in and teach yourself how to leverage, pick a software, Revit or Recap, or go out and learn how to do GPS-driven surveying or whatever it is, dive in. I have a few people on my team that I've brought in that are younger, fresh out of high school while they were in college, and I've gotten them to the point where they're drone certified, they're doing topo mapping, they're doing laser scanning and processing that data, they're doing GPS-driven surveying processes, and they never had any formal education in that other than the training we offered here. So that's why I say there's no wrong path. For me, the right path was diving into that research route. I wanted to go a different route. I wanted to push the envelope. I wanted to be on the forefront of what we were doing. And so my connection with UF, for many reasons, I'll always have a special place in my heart with the University of Florida. And so I stay connected with them. We sponsor Ph.D. fellows. We hire students from there all the time. In fact, most of my team that's behind this virtual background that you can't see, most of them are Gators. So being in Virginia, I make the Hokies a little jealous by bringing Gators up here, but that's okay. I'm going to keep doing it anyway. But that connection with the University of Florida for me is so important. It's something I'd encourage, not just University of Florida, but any university connection for industry to get involved. When you stay involved, you help guide research. You help build students' interests. You help show them avenues that maybe they didn't know existed. And eventually what happens is you're not only creating these opportunities, but you're a part of it for future career expansion, for research that can fundamentally change the way we all do what we do. And so I always encourage that level of involvement. And really, that can take on a number of different forms. But for us, it's really become a very involved situation where I spend quite a bit of time down in Gainesville throughout the year, minus last year, of course.
I love to hear you say that there's no wrong way to get involved, because that is a very symbiotic relationship between industry, technology, innovation, and education. And speaking of that, I'm sure plenty of our listeners are interested to hear how a Ph.D. from Florida in construction and planning with advanced construction technologies ended up working for a residential builder rather than maybe a more traditional course working for a traditional commercial GC in the BIM space. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. I think as I was going through my educational process and doing my research, I don't think I would have believed you if you had told me I was going to be with a residential builder, to be honest. But, what ended up happening was my last year of my doctorate, I was, working on that dissertation, taking up most of my time. And I had the privilege of giving our Eagle Construction's founder, Brian Kornblau, a tour of the facility that I had helped build and design that really allowed us to leverage technology. And we were inducting him into the Hall of Fame. And so I was asked on a Saturday to give him a tour. And so, of course, did it. I was very proud of the space that I had a hand in crafting. And what came out of that conversation was the spark, that moment of recognition that he had and that I had was, wait a minute, there's something here. And we need to talk about it more. So, we finished that conversation. Of course, it was on a Saturday, so it was a football game. So we had a lot of fun. And then, he flew the entire executive team from Eagle up about 2 weeks later so that I could give everybody the presentation again. And from there, what I realized was that the level of opportunity that existed in residential construction was counterintuitive. I think when you think about the expense of building information modeling technologies, and sometimes it's not just the software, but it's the human capital expense as well. The expense of those things, when you think about a single home, it doesn't work, right? Those numbers don't add up. But what we came to realize extremely quickly in our conversations, and for me, what became very exciting, which is one of the reasons I'm here, is those opportunities are not a single home. That is hundreds of homes a year. And the iteration that you can go through is almost immediate. So when you're working on a commercial job that's 2 to 3 years long, you're iterating through technology, you learn a lot, and then that team can't apply that knowledge until the next project. What happens in residential is the technology we're bringing in and we're leveraging and the tools that we're providing to our teams are able to be integrated and used all pretty much instantaneously. That also means we can course correct very quickly. So when we start going down a path where we see something, we can make that adjustment and we can dive right in and we can kind of tweak. And those incremental adjustments can happen day to day or week to week. And so the second half of that was we realized that the residential industry just wasn't leveraging these advanced technologies the way that they could be. And there's a giant market opportunity here. I mean, you talk about sales tools, constructability tools, your back office and purchasing, warranty, homeowner experience. You can go down the list. There's really a number of different ways. And so that became a really exciting opportunity to make a big impact in an industry. And I've taken that deep dive into that full force. And my goal is to make Eagle the best residential home builder in the world. And I tell my team, that doesn't mean the most homes. That doesn't mean the biggest homes. That doesn't mean, but it means I want to make sure we are leveraging this technology to a point where we're helping, blaze that trail that we can build better. We all should be building better. And these tools that we'll talk a little bit about today, I'm sure these tools are a part of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting you note the quick life cycle of projects and the fact that you don't lose a lot of knowledge transfer from project to project, perhaps the way you would shuffling commercial project teams. And the last time we spoke, you mentioned something that I think our listeners would probably be very interested in, and that was the fact that you don't do BIM in a bubble. And maybe you could elaborate on that and maybe share a little bit about that with our audience.
Yeah, of course. So my philosophy with all technology, but really the building information modeling world, is that these things can't happen in a bubble and they can't happen without everybody else around you. You can have the best modelers and data technicians and everybody in the world, but if your trades, if the rest of your company, if your field teams, and this is commercial or residential, if they're not on board with you and can't leverage the tool that you're putting in front of them, then none of it matters. And I think what I realized very quickly, and of course, as you can imagine, my focus being on the integration of these technologies as opposed to just the development of them, that was an important thing for me, was finding that moment of, we know these technologies work, right? I think we can all understand the advantages these individual pieces of technology can offer, and they function extremely well. Where you find the trouble is with the human aspect, with the integration, with how it's being used. And I don't see that as a bad thing. I just see it as something we have to make sure we recognize and use to our advantage. And so the first thing I did when I got here was I committed to myself, and I made sure everybody understood that there's going to be a lot of questions. We're going to ask a lot of questions. We're going to get a lot of input. We're going to bring our trade partners in. We're going to be getting everybody involved in this process. And I think by creating a process in which every part of the organization was involved, it's now everybody's process. Not, the BIM guy trying to cram some technology down their throat. And what happens is everybody has ownership, and that extends beyond just our company. I think as we look at our trade partners, they do this for a living. They have a lot of value to add. And so by bringing them in and showing them how the tools that we have in front of us through building information modeling and laser scanning and some of these things can help improve their business as well. And furthermore, that we're listening when they tell us things. That's the key, right? This communication tool that is building information modeling and some of these technologies is a two-way street that we can take input in and really drive it back out to them. So for me, it's not just about Eagle becoming a leader. It's about making sure everybody in our market and around us is also able to build better through leveraging these tools. And so we don't use these tools as a gotcha device, right? This isn't a, hey, we figured out exactly how many square feet of this or that. They're partner tools for us. If any information we have, we want to provide to our subcontractors and our partners, because if they can build better and they can be more effective and more efficient, then everything else works that way too. And so that's kind of what I meant by not building in a bubble, was everybody has to be able to leverage it, and not everybody has to be able to leverage the same tools. And that's where, so part of my job and what I do every day is identifying which tools to use and how to put those tools in the right places so that people can leverage them. These tools aren't hammers. You can't just swing them at everything. And so trying to, and that's a tough balance sometimes. And sometimes that means finding out, you start to implement something and realize maybe that's not quite the right fit.
Right. And it's interesting. It still comes back to that human element, right? It's the HR component, and that's the real resource. BIM is a tool; it's the hammer, but somebody's still got to swing it.
Right.
Which on the commercial side, where we primarily operate, it's hard enough to get subcontractor buy-in on each project. Maybe you could give us a little insight as to how that's maybe different in your world and how you guys go about generating buy-in from your trade partners and subcontractors you work with.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of what we're all trying to do, is that buy-in from all the different trade partners and the people who have to leverage the information is crucial. And so the way that I've gone about doing that here and finding some success is to make sure that they're involved in the process. And I don't put the onus on them to make sure they understand how to use, create the models and do these things. Because of course, in residential, some of our trades aren't as advanced technologically as some of the ones you find on the commercial side. And so what we did is we met them where they are. We bring them in and we use the technology to help them understand better, to help them show us what we can be doing better based on their knowledge and wisdom. And by getting them involved in the process, but not just dumping all of this extra work on them, I'm able to slowly layer those things on and slowly provide more information. And what happened pretty quickly, surprisingly quickly actually, was that as I started to provide some of this information that at first was just, okay, thanks for the information, I appreciate it, started to become, hey, can you run this for us real quick? Can we look at that? Can I come to your office and we can pull up the model? And And as soon as I started getting those questions, I knew we had won. Yeah. I knew that was the moment of transition. And I think what's interesting about that, and I've seen it on the commercial side when I've worked in that sector as well, which is if you have a trade that isn't prepared to do the in-depth modeling that's required and to be able to keep up with the architects and the structural trades that sometimes are more advanced in the BIM world, it's a very daunting task. The barrier to entry to go from taking in drawings and hand drawing and coordinating in the field to creating a fully flushed high LOD model that you can use to coordinate, it's a daunting hurdle for some trades. And so my goal is to try to make sure we break that barrier to entry down as best we can and invite them in without an insurmountable task in front of them. And on the commercial side, that happens as well, I think, and starting to see a big shift in the technological capabilities of some of these trades. And I think that also slips right back to one of the things Mike had asked at the beginning, which was that labor gap or that talent gap in the ability to leverage these technologies. Going out and finding a qualified modeler, finding somebody who's a good data technician that can make sure these models have what they need isn't easy. That's where that connection with the universities and, looking at, helping make sure that everybody around you is moving in that space becomes key.
Big thing I'm taking from this, Nathan, is collaboration, bringing everyone together, the human element itself, getting the team all on the same page. So can you give us an example then? So Eagle's kind of taken this approach. We have brought everyone on the same team. We have buy-in from the subs. How is Eagle using that technology to drive results?
It's a long-winded question or a long-winded answer to what seems like an easy question. I'll try to be as brief if I can and give a nice, easy example. I think what we realized early on was each of these tools has the opportunity to provide advantages in different ways. And so what I spent a lot of my time doing was looking at the tools and figuring out how we could find some early wins to help demonstrate to everybody on our teams that we're headed down the path that we should be, and then also to take those wins and build on them. One of the main ways that we use these things is we had one of the first products we designed that we fully 3D BIM, coordinated through the BIM process. It was a basement product. And in Virginia, in our area in Virginia, there wasn't a lot of basements. So we had a site that had 300 something lots, and surprise, the engineers finished and 40% of them are basements. So what do? Right? We have to develop a product. So what we did was we developed a product that has what we call a terrace, which is a walkout basement, but we engineered it in such a way that you have 9-foot ceilings, no drop beams, no soffits. The entire HVAC system is between the first and second floor, so you have no energy or efficiency loss by putting things in the attic. Our duct runs are as short as they can be. We were able to reduce our HVAC system by 1.5 tons. We were able to reduce our structural package because we're not framing soffits and we're not doing all this work. And by pre-coordinating, we were able to go out and build our first prototype with very few issues. Actually, one of the issues was just a header of a fireplace was in the wrong place in a panel that was created. So for us, that was a huge win. We didn't have to spend the money and effort building a physical prototype because we built the digital one. And that was a great demonstration tool. And I think we're now experiencing that with our new product that we're putting out that's more of a stacked condo type product, kind of a townhome style footprint. And I estimate we'll save a couple $100,000 on this first building simply by leveraging these tools and bringing our trades in and coordinating. And so we're not going out and testing things in the field with physical materials. We're doing it virtually. And now more than ever, that's key because of the price of materials and the way the world has changed in the past 18 months. That becomes a huge opportunity for us and for anybody to leverage these tools to be able to make decisions earlier and more effectively with the appropriate data to be able to make sure that decision is the correct one.
And I guess carrying forward that concept of data driving decision making, how are you continuing to implement those strategies in your current portfolio? And maybe you could shed a little light on how that's going.
Yeah, of course. So I call it my mountain of data. It's what I tell the team I now have, which is, within the first 18 months of me being here, we went from being a 2D organization to a 3D BIM driven organization. And what that means is now being almost 3 years into this journey, I have a lot of data, hundreds and hundreds of home models, some commercial projects, renovations. As of January of 2020, we laser scan every single home we build before the drywall goes in. So the amount of data we now have is substantial. And so what we're doing is now diving into what we call the back office side of the world, which is looking at how we purchase, looking at variances in different home models. So we allow customizations, which is something that's unique. And so now we can really start to assess the impact those customizations have on our efficiencies and productivity, because we can look at actual expenditures and compare those to the known quantities we have in these homes. On top of that, using the data, because we laser scan every home, we now basically have an X-ray version of everything that we build, which means when we have warranty questions come up or when we have to go in and look at something, we have the ability to just peel the skin off the building and understand exactly where everything is along the way, which means there's no more exploratory surgery, as I like to call it. If we have to go into a home, it's precise. We know where we're going. And we can leverage these tools with our structural partners to make sure that we're building effectively. And so I think that data, now the area that we're currently diving into, partly because that's where we were headed, and also it's just become even more important in the past couple of months, is diving into our ability to purchase more effectively and to provide our trades the highest level of accuracy they could have as far as material quantities and what they're going to need, because then that allows them to purchase correctly and to purchase effectively, so there are no surprises. And it also allows them to procure materials earlier, especially when some of those materials, there may be some pipeline concerns with some of those. And so the data we have is now going to allow us to drive in and complete a lot of analytical research into how we can improve organizationally and how we can be better partners for our trades and how we can, at that point, then build better for our homeowners and our communities.
Yeah, and that translates to immediate ROI via the BIM process. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the cost savings you guys have seen since your transition from 2D to 3D, kind of what that looks like. I'm sure a lot of our audience who are maybe teetering on the verge of a BIM transition may be interested to hear, what kind of ROI they may be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, ROI is, that's the holy grail of BIM, right? Is understanding how quickly that return will come. And it's hard because, I like to say, especially in the commercial world, right? You're not going to build two identical buildings and build one wrong and build one correctly and then compare them. Very rarely are there opportunities to do that. And then why would you build one incorrectly just because? So what I look at for our return is I look at some of the wins we had and some of the things we were able to accomplish early on. I think when we did the analytics, probably within the first year, there was a handful of problems we were able to solve or we were able to create solutions for. There were some really tight infill job sites in the city that we were able to design and reduce our risk because we understood how those townhomes could fit, so we didn't lose lots. So really within the first 12 to 14 months, we made up everything that was spent on the lab that we created, the technology we put in place. And what we've seen now is the team that's sitting behind me is so capable that we're able to put out a number of homes with a level of accuracy and a level of detail and information in a much shorter period of time. I think, our team's record to put out a plan right now, and they try to beat it all the time, but it's a little hard these days. The record is 1 hour and 20 minutes to go from a contract to permit drawings.
Wow.
I mean, so the human capital savings and the return on that alone is huge. And then if you figure you find one mistake in a building that saves you some money, and in my world, then you multiply that by 300, that comes out pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that's very impressive, especially over the timeline that you're talking about, like 12 to 14 months immediate return on your investment. And then everything after that is gravy, particularly in your industry where there are very repeatable processes. But I think that also translates to the commercial world, hotels, hospitals. There are repeatable prefabrication processes in the commercial side. And maybe you could expand on that a little bit, because I don't think there's a CFO out there who wouldn't mind that kind of savings and that kind of timeline being replicated on all their future projects.
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think once you start to see what it can do and you figure out how to effectively implement some of this technology, it kind of becomes a no-brainer. What I like to see BIM departments as, whether you call them virtual design construction departments or BIM departments or however you want to coin it, depending on which company you're in, I see them as multipliers, not expenditures. So really, and what I mean by that is the departments and what we're able to do multiplies everybody else's opportunity. We provide efficiencies and we provide information at a level that allows everybody else to perform at a higher level. So what you're essentially doing is you're taking some of your most seasoned project managers or project teams and you're institutionalizing their knowledge. All those lessons learned, you're institutionalizing it, which means that person is now able to take that knowledge and share it with everybody, which means now everybody else can perform and act on that knowledge. And so what we're doing is we're multiplying effectiveness. And I think as you start to see this move forward, the transition to BIM for a company that wasn't a BIM organization, Eagle wasn't when I got here. It's a big step. It's a bold step. And especially in an industry that didn't use it, that was a bold move. But I think what I made sure everybody understood up front was if you're going to take that step, you need to take the step. You don't tiptoe into it. You can't dip your toe into the water. Test out a few things first, but when you're ready to make the jump, you jump. And the reason being is, I put together a plan that I also said, we're going to jump. But that being said, this is not a 6-month process. We're not going to snap our fingers and when everybody comes in on Monday, we have all this information and everything's wonderful, right? I wish it was that easy. It would have made a lot of things much simpler. But what it did was, I made the statement and I followed through on it, which was we're going to do this the right way. You have to take that approach to make sure you're creating the foundation, whether it's with the models or the data, or if you're an owner, looking at your management plan or your BIM requirements, working with you all to understand what do we need and spending the upfront time to effectively determine what it is you need, what level of detail you need, where you need it. Because as soon as you create all that and you create that foundation, it takes off like a rocket ship. And that's what I found here was I had a much longer time horizon. And if you ask our president, he thinks I was kind of playing him a little bit, but I promise I wasn't. That time horizon was exponentially shortened because we laid the foundation. And we took our CAD processes and BIM processes and had them run in parallel, and then slowly brought BIM up while bringing CAD down. And what happened was as soon as we hit that inflection point, it became exponential and it just took off. But the only reason that was possible was because of all the work that went in. And I think the same could be said for an owner or for a GC or for anybody who's looking to do this, is to spend the upfront time to truly understand. And I think that's where, you all are doing some great work and trying to help people really evaluate what it is we need. How are we going to leverage it and how do we get there? Because as soon as you find that out, you're running.
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about the investment. And that's the throwback from the ROI that a lot of times people jump straight to the ROI and forget the initial investment and what that looks like and the work up front. So the ROI part sounds great, but it is a lot of work to get there, particularly for people entering that space for the first time. And glad you brought that up. And typically we like to give our audience 3 takeaways to focus on from each episode. And keeping in mind that our normal audience is insurance, technology, and construction professionals, what do you think those things may be? I know you kind of already talked about them departments being viewed as multipliers of ROI and savings and technology transfer. I would assume that's one, but maybe you could give us a few more there.
Yeah, 100%. That's where I'll start, is viewing the BIM departments or your BIM professionals or your BIM management plan as a multiplier, not an expense. It's not a line item. It's something that has the opportunity to institutionalize knowledge and to help create opportunity, and it will drive value. That much we know. And so I think that's number one. That takeaway is to change the mindset. This technology can be a multiplying factor, whether it's on the management side where you're just using the data to make decisions or to understand the project better, whether it's on the control side to make sure you're doing what, all the trades are where they're supposed to be and you understand that project, or whether it's on the physical construction side. That multiplication concept is something that I think is really important. I think next on the list would probably be that, these tools, and I call them tools because they're not solutions. For me, all of these individual pieces are just tools. They can be wielded correctly or incorrectly. And that's entirely up to the process, right? And I think seeing that these tools are more than just a model or a device. What they are is they're communication tools. They're tools to help people understand and communicate better, and to help people move through these projects with better information and in a more effective way. Because when you have informed members of your team at all levels and they can understand what everybody's working on, it's so much easier to identify those opportunities for improvement. And so all of these pieces being a communication tool, I think is really important.
Yeah, it's funny. People tend to overlook the I in BIM as a component when that's the most important part, right? It's 100% information transfer between human resources, even though the modeling and the software is the kind of the sexy face of it. The underlying I part of BIM is the more important facet. Agreed.
And that's something that I think is very important for everybody to remember, is that middle letter in that acronym is what really matters. Other than that, it's just a pretty 3D model. So I think, that would be my second one. And if I had to give a third, I think I've kind of touched on it throughout, but it's really making sure that we're looking at BIM as a tool. That's what it is. And it needs to be leveraged effectively. And sometimes that means knowing when not to use it and knowing to what level to use it. There are certainly times when some model coordination can help, but it doesn't need to go to that level of an LOD 400. Or you have to understand how to wield that tool effectively, because wielding it effectively creates more effective data. And then that data becomes a byproduct, but a tool, again, that can be used. So I think that's something that would be my third one, is to think of all of these pieces of technology not as end solutions or silver bullets, but rather they are tools for really anybody in the industry, whether you're an owner, whether you're in the insurance industry looking to establish risk, whether you're a builder or an architect. These tools are important to have in your holster and to understand how they can be leveraged so you can encourage others to use them when you know there's going to be that benefit coming out the back end.
Now, Nathan, no matter what, there's always naysayers, right? It doesn't matter what you're doing, there's a naysayer everywhere. In what ways, talking about these data points and this wealth of information you're gathering as a residential builder, what's a creative solution that you've been working on with utilizing those data points? And how are you implementing that? What's something that might surprise someone to hear a residential builder doing with this technology?
Ooh, I got a couple I can choose from. I think, I've got a couple pokers in the fire that we're working with them, as you can imagine. But one of the things that we can talk about is warranty and facilities management. So, because I think it's applicable to more than just residential. The amount of data that we have in that model, coupled with the reality capture information from our laser scans and our x-rays of these homes that we now have sitting on a server that we can access at any point, really opens the door for us to create a process by which we can get into buildings, understand them, create preventative maintenance plans, go through and provide services to homeowners, not dissimilar to what you do in the commercial environment, provide those services to conduct facilities management integration at a higher level. And what happens is that becomes a very quickly accessible thing because the data is already there. It's already all captured as long as it's been planned for up front and it's been captured correctly. And I think from a residential standpoint, you'd think, well, facilities management on a commercial level, that makes sense, right? A lot of expense in operating a building, a lot of opportunity there for improvement. On the residential side, though, if you think about it, there's just as much opportunity. Every homeowner has to manage their home. What are the warranties on the appliances? When do things have to be changed? What is that light fixture? Should something have to be adjusted? What's that material? Okay, so it's siding. What kind of siding? Where, when does that have to be done? What's the warranty on my roof? All of this information is now tracked and can be tracked. And so that data-rich environment becomes a super valuable commodity that can be leveraged and can be used to ensure long-term success of everything that we do. So I think that's something that hopefully is maybe a little interesting. Maybe I'm just a nerd about it. But I think that data piece is just so crucial because it opens a number of different doors that allow us to provide services, could allow us to create spin-off opportunities. Because at the end of the day, if you think about your home, the ideal situation is you don't have to do anything, right? All the service is taken care of, everything's done, our maintenance-free community concept. This is going to allow that to become a reality at a much higher level than it currently is.
That's really something, Nathan. I mean, it is truly, talk about a ROI. This is an avenue that maybe you would never have thought about, but once you have the access to it, it's a new source of information and a new way to maybe pursue that. So wrapping things up a little bit, Nathan, we do like to give our audience an action item. I know we've talked about 3 key takeaways. What is something, if you are a CFO, a GC, the owner, anyone really who is looking to implement what we've talked about today, what is something they can do today, tomorrow to begin looking at that?
I love that you end the podcast with this concept of, what can we do, right? We talked about a lot of interesting things today. Again, at least I think they're interesting. And so now what? Now what do we do with this knowledge? And how does it become applicable to more than just the crazy BIM people trying to come up with these concepts? I have a tagline that I used to write at the top of my journal. It's on my screen. I share it with my team every time we finish a meeting, and that's better today, better tomorrow. And by that, what I mean is if every day we look for incremental improvement in ourselves and what we're doing, eventually you look up and in our case, 18 months later, things are quite a bit different than they used to be. And I think so that's where I want to start, is thinking about how can someone, the takeaway would be, how can you improve your knowledge, your understanding of this environment? Because while it may not seem directly related to somebody in different aspects of this industry or who may be watching, it can create tangential thought. And it can spark something that allows you to dig in a little bit deeper. So, my action item would be I challenge anybody who's listening or interested to spend 15 to 30 minutes. Start there. Doing some research online, reading, watching some YouTube videos about innovative construction techniques, whether that be concrete printing, drone-based construction, modularization, prefabrication, new means and methods of how we're building, which are now more important than ever as materials change and become available in different ways. You talk about building automation, the Internet of Things. Understand what that means. What is it? That's a hot word that gets thrown around. So what does that mean? What is it? You have automated design and iterative design and machine learning. A lot of these different pieces that spending 15 to 30 minutes, just digging in a little bit, find something that's interesting and allow it to create that tangential thought or that opportunity or that spark that's going to make you better. And I think that would be the takeaway I'd like to challenge everybody with.
And I love that, especially relative to our firm, because we are very big on process improvement, not only internally, but externally. And that's what drives a lot of innovation that I think we bring to the table for our clients, which it's the same mindset. It's what can we do to get better every day? What can we do to be more efficient? What can we learn about and bring to our clients? And I love that you view the world very much in the same way, even though it's slightly different industry working on the residential side, but bringing it to market with the same focus, same concept, and same ideas of process improvement. And I'd love to get in a couple of quick questions before we let you go, but
of course,
maybe you could give us a little insight in your world where you see people struggling the most with BIM implementation.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think, BIM implementation, where I see the struggles are when people dive into the process and don't lay that foundation. Because what it does is it creates failure, and failure can be a good thing. I believe that we learn more from our failures than we do our successes. That being said, when you're trying to integrate new technology, especially in an industry that is notoriously slow for allowing advancement, when you bring in a new technology and you provide it to people that have been building for a very long time and it doesn't work, or it doesn't solve a problem, or the expectations for what it's going to do haven't been set correctly, it just creates distrust. And then people say, oh yeah, that BIM thing. Well, we still had a problem and there was still an incorrect dimension. So clearly it's all wrong. And so I think the biggest problem I see is when people treat some of these tools, they present them through these rose-colored glasses of, it's going to solve everything. So the second you buy into this system, all your troubles have gone and everything will be easy and you barely even need to be on the job site. It'll build itself. And it seems kind of crazy, but go to some trade shows and that's kind of what they want you to believe sometimes. As long as you're setting expectations up front that these are, and this is how I view it, these are tools and these are the things they're going to work to solve. However, each person who's going to use the tool has to help create an environment in which they can solve the problems. And so when that doesn't happen is where I see the biggest struggle with BIM implementation, is when it just kind of gets thrown out and put in front of people and you don't have the proper training or support in developing those protocols or that informational guide, it fails. And once you get a failure, it's, multiplication of times harder to get people to try again.
That's the hardest area where we have buy-in, is where people have been burned with those misaligned expectations. They think they've been sold the magic bullet, and they didn't quite get to that level of achievement they thought they would. Right.
But that's something that is easily overcome, and so I think that's just something for everybody to keep in mind.
That's great. And all right, Nathan, one more, and this might be interesting for me because I've known you a long time. But what is something that our listeners hearing you for the first time today may be surprised to hear about you personally?
Ooh. All right. So what do I want to share about me personally? I think I've always been interested in doing things, not just technologically. And I think something that might be interesting is that for me, it's not just about the technology, it's about anything hands-on. So rebuilt the engine in my first car by myself, rebuilt the engine on my motorcycle. My wife and I both ride motorcycles, working on a pilot's license at the moment. I think for me, it's that inquisitive nature that has led me down this technological path extends to physical things as well. So I like to view things as challenges rather than problems. And that extends to just about everything that I do. So I've over my life, I've destroyed a number of household appliances trying to understand how they work, which, Mike, shouldn't surprise you. But I think that's something that still to this day doesn't end. And that's that inquisitive nature and that curious nature that I have, that I think is why, for me, the technological space is so exciting, because it's always changing. You go year to year and something's new and different. You have to figure it out and figure out how you can apply it. So yeah, I think that might be something that's interesting.
Fantastic. And Nathan, you might have recognized now the title of the podcast is The Building Bite. So that's BIM, insurance technology with the experts. You are the expert. Today, we focused on BIM, but the question remains, what are you taking a bite out of today? I know you're in Richmond, Virginia. What is the local fare? What is your favorite?
Ooh, well, today is Cinco de Mayo, so it is taco night. I got my taco socks on. We are ready for taco night tonight. And one of the local restaurants we have is actually one of our communities. It's called Wong's Tacos. It's a Asian Mexican fusion restaurant, which seems like a strange combination. But if you're ever in the Richmond, Glen Allen area, stop by Wong's Tacos, because I promise you won't be disappointed. And I'm pretty sure they'll be pretty busy today for the rest of the day as we move forward. They've got some nice chorizo egg rolls, which are a game changer.
Well, Nathan, thanks for chatting with us today. A wealth of great information and perhaps a lot of new insights for our listeners. If they want to hook up with you, where can they find you?
LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to find me and get in touch with me. I do my best to respond to everybody I can on LinkedIn these days. So that would be the best place to find me. So my LinkedIn is just n-blinn. And that should hopefully, look forward to getting in touch with anybody or, making new connections.
Thank you, Nathan. We appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey,
enjoy the tacos.
I'll do my best. Thank you all for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and good luck to everybody listening to you all for trying to find better. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to The Building Bite. This podcast has been brought to you by Proactive. Check us out on thebuildingbite.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media for all future The Building Bite news and updates. You can also find us on your favorite apps, including Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Amazon. If you have ideas for episode topics that we should cover on the show, or you know somebody who would be a perfect guest, let us know at connect@thebuildingbite.com.